Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're continuing our series of webinars, which we started in March of this year, with an objective to offer market insights with respect to pharmaceutical industry in general and AI in pharma space specifically. So I shall start with sharing my screen. I hope everyone can see me. So the objective of today's seminar is to explore how the advancements in the pharma and biotech industry and the AI-driven evolution of it are positioned to tackle global pandemic of COVID-19. Today's webinar is organized by Deep Pharma Intelligence, which is an analytical joint venture by and between Deep Knowledge Analytics, which is a deep tech focused analytical subsidiary of Deep Knowledge Group, and Biopharma Trend, which is a reputable digital hub for market intelligence and business insights in pharma and biotech industries. Together, Deep Pharma Intelligence is inheriting 3 years worth of resources and expertise developed by Pharma division of Deep Knowledge Analytics. My name is 𝐂𝐈-𝐝𝐫𝐲. Greetings from San Francisco. I'm managing partner of Deep Knowledge Group, and I will be the host and moderator of today's webinar. I'm delighted to be joined by a number of great speakers who will offer their insights with respect to application use cases of AI in biotech, pharma, and healthcare tech. Each presenter will speak for approximately 10 minutes individually, and then we will be followed by questions from the audience. We will start with Dr. Andrei Buvaylo, who is Director of Deep Pharma Intelligence, and he will cover the topic of AI-driven evolution of pharma industry to meet global challenge, which is COVID-19. Thereafter, we will welcome Igor Kindyukov, who is Head of Algorithmic Analytics of Deep Pharma Intelligence, and he will speak about algorithms and data for biotech investment analytics. Further, we will have Macy Smith, Vice President of United Solutions, who will cover the topic of connecting the healthcare ecosystem through consumer AI predictive assessment. Thereafter, we'll be joined by Maximilian Winter and Krish Ramadurai, who will have a joint presentations. They're both representing Harmonix Fund. Maximilian is a general partner, and Krish is a partner and healthcare and life sciences principal. Then we will have Dasha Redka, who is applied scientist in Cyclica, and she will cover PolyPharmDB, a resource for drug repurposing, an application in COVID-19 drug discovery. If the audience would like to stay in the loop with respect to our news, we welcome you to visit our website, which is www.deep-pharma.tech. We have been producing a number of open access analytical reports for a number of years, and you can access them there, including the updated versions. Also, as I've noted, you can stay informed about our current and future events, including webinars, and feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. And then without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Dr. Andrei Buvaylo. Andrei, welcome.
Thank you, Kate, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. I'd like today to provide you with some highlights and insights that we uncovered about the AI-driven evolution of pharma industry to meet global challenge, which is COVID-19. Essentially, we'll go over some specific use cases where companies in various different areas of the pharma industry apply AI technologies and basically trying to accelerate and meet the global challenge. And as we all know, the pandemics have taken us all by storm and basically created the unprecedented disruption in all activities globally. That's basically one of the reasons we are now talking today about the AI. Why is that? Because AI is something that is basically, this is the technology of speed. This is the technology of real-time exploration of data. And so the very nature of the problem that we are encountered with the COVID-19 pandemics is basically a problem that can potentially be solved using various AI techniques. And by the way, just to start this presentation, there's a nice and interesting fact that Canadian startup developed a platform, Blue Dot, which was able to spot the coming pandemics several days before the actual official announcement by analyzing data about unusual pneumonia cases happening in China. And unfortunately, this fact did not help very much to react, but this is something that should very well illustrate the where we should be developing the AI systems in future to meet future pandemics. But anyway, let's come back to the artificial intelligence. This technology is fairly old. It originated somewhere in the middle of the last century. And till the 20,000s and the last decade, the technology was fairly theoretical in nature. But owing to the development of different computational technologies, mostly cloud-based infrastructures, and algorithmic developments, the AI is now a mainstream technology, which is widely commercialized and has very real practical life applications. The pharma industry was a late adopter, so to speak, for this kind of technologies, and we at our company estimated that the alpha go moment for the pharmaceutical AI was somewhere around 2018, 2019, when a lot of biotechs basically started showing some tangible results of applying AI technologies, deep learning in particular, for therapeutics discovery, and then actually started showing some tangible results. And in 2020, 21 and onward, the technology is maturing now towards different commercial applications. And as I said, the pandemics is a big data problem. Why is that? Because it touches millions of people, and therefore billions of data points are collected in various aspects, from all the way from tracing pandemics to pharmacovigilance, surveillance, to medical applications, etc. Millions and billions of data points are gathered rapidly to monitor this whole thing going on. And AI systems help basically analyze and make sense of the whole lot of data. The applications of AI for tackling COVID pandemics fall into three major areas. Like, we will cover today the molecular scale, which is drug discovery, accelerating drug discovery, vaccine discovery and development, and different biological research problems. Then clinical scale, which is everything that touches upon, patient outcome prediction, diagnostics, rapid diagnostics, screening of potential COVID-affected people in streets, etc. And then societal scale, it's a very wide area where AI is applied for different operational societal problems, like modeling, forecasting, clustering of different affected areas, regions, and even tracing hate speech related to, COVID and all that sort of things. And today I'd like to focus a little bit on the medical applications where AI is applied, specifically focusing on the coronavirus pandemic. So this is the therapeutic discovery vaccines. This is diagnostics and medical applications. There is digital health and infrastructural applications, and statistics, forecasting, everything that touches upon epidemiological modeling and prediction of further developments of things. We have profiled the area and identified a lot of companies. This list is far from being, comprehensive. It's just some fairly notable companies with high visibility. But even this basically illustrates how diverse the landscape of the applications is. So in terms of therapeutic discovery and basic biology, we have profiled before the landscape of AI companies which developed therapeutics. And in particular, we have found that around more than 50% of all the companies that have been applying AI for years, they managed to refocus and basically on the COVID-related tasks like either inhibitor discovery or different other applications to tackle the research part of the COVID problem. And so it tells how flexible the AI-based companies are, how flexible it is to rebuild models and basically forward resources into the ongoing need. Probably one of the strongest cases here is the repurposing, and also there are a number of companies who use AI to generate molecules from scratch. So here are just a couple of examples. And by the way, over the year, some of those companies managed to actually demonstrate some pretty amazing results. Like, for example, AI first company, Benevolent AI, managed to rapidly identify a quite nice drug candidate early in the 2020, baricitinib, and then it just published news days ago that it reduced deaths in hospitalized COVID patients by 38%. That was the Eli Lilly's clinical trial. And another quite interesting example is AI Therapeutics, which is now having the candidate in phase 2 clinical study, which is also quite interesting. And they all use so-called knowledge graphs infrastructure to modeling to predict their candidates, to find targets and predict candidates. And this is one of the most interesting application cases. Another interesting case is in silica medicine, which managed to identify a number of candidates in just several days. There was also repurposed AI, which partnered with the Scripps Research to leverage their AI-based platform to suggest some quite notable hits. And so this list is very short. It's just introduction to what is going on in this area. But interestingly, a number of lockdowns and a number of disruptions in the people's usual working hours, it resulted in the industry shifting towards robotized and remote modes of experimentation. And this is one interesting trend to reflect on. And for a number of companies here, they develop remotely controlled labs where biological research can be done. And we believe, and Deep Pharma Intelligence, we believe that this trend will be accelerating even after the pandemic is over, because this is really cost efficient and a new way of doing research. In terms of vaccines and vaccination, that's probably the most important trend in the biotech industry is, of course, vaccination. Everybody's talking about vaccines, and this is probably the most important part of what is happening. And here I would start with that AI is indeed used by many research labs, and a lot of research is going on to apply AI to tackle vaccine development and vaccine discovery by providing data and analyzing omics data, etc. But even big guys like Pfizer, they actually use some machine learning stuff to accelerate research in the very early days when the pandemic just hit and they needed to act really fast. But I would say that AI has very marginal role in the vaccine development in terms of research. But much bigger role, much more important is actually the operational role and the actual vaccination process, identification of the supply and demand, and predicting responses, pharmacovigilance, how vaccines react with patients and where risks emerge. All kinds of things that are happening after the vaccine is already shipped, so to speak, from the lab. And here AI is applied to triage and impact modeling, figuring out which patient populations should be vaccinated in the first turn to save, let's say, doses, demand forecasting, supply chain management, and post-vaccination surveillance. So these are all major areas. The vaccination is a business, and the industry is a very complex thing, and a lot of data here needs to be analyzed in real time or very rapidly to be able to make sense of what's happening. And a lot of companies are actually already applying AI to tackle some of these use cases. Just briefly go through some of them. ABN is planning to cooperate with hospitals, US hospitals, using a system to manage vaccine distribution. Company 𝐀𝐈-𝐝𝐼𝑧𝐝 combines open source data to estimate load on vaccine distribution spots in Africa. And by the way, they combine a lot of data sources, even satellite data from cell phones, social media activity, government data, and everything is together is analyzed to sort of predict the vaccination, where the resources should go. And so they have fairly cool results, so to speak. 𝐺enPact in the UK created AI-based vaccine batch and load tracking system to basically solve the problem, optimize the supply chain for this process. And another interesting use case is that in the UK, the 𝐺enPact basically deployed a system which is based on the artificial intelligence. It is processing the reports, the patient reports, like yellow cards, where the system is trying to find unspotted, side effects, unspotted patterns in how vaccines actually work in patients, maybe some risks, etc., etc. And finally, there are some, so to speak, digital health tools to support the ecosystem, which connects patients to doctors, to vaccination facilities, and tracks everyone, etc. So it's very nice to have this kind of interconnectivity and real-time capability of the analytics. This is what AI is all about. Diagnostics and surveillance is another major area for the application. Here we have just thousands of use cases. We will not go over everything here, but just to note that a lot of FDA approvals have been done in this area for the Philips, Vida, Mayo Clinics, etc. Quite creative use cases emerge, like, for example, trying to identify the affected COVID patients by coughing, and where the mobile application essentially analyzes the sound and then can quite realistically predict the risks of the patient being actually ill. Analyzing CT scans to differentiate COVID pneumonia from different types of pneumonias, which is not a trivial task. And integration of different data types like CT scans together with other clinical test results to find false negative cases which were not spotted by people, by doctors. And even cases like high throughput screening of people using a variety of, thermal screening data and different breathing rate change, etc. Even such things which are quite difficult or impossible to process by humans in any form, they can be processed by AI systems which spot the patterns, some unusual difference in the data, and can alarm the risk. And yeah, and a lot of use cases here with the supplying, with the prioritizing vaccine rollouts and assessing the risks of severe cases in COVID affected patients versus, let's say, moderate or asymptomatic cases. And of course, an interesting fact that contact tracing using digital tools and AI is a big thing, and basically the programs have been rolled out in many places across the world already, and a lot of those systems use a real-time AI and centralized data analytics system to sort of understand what's going on. So key takeaways from this presentation. This is a very short one, but we have analyzed a lot of data, a lot of use cases internally, and we found that, first of all, COVID-19 indeed catalyzed the AI adoption rate in pretty much every medical area, from drug discovery to clinical research, production, logistics, especially pharmacovigilance and healthcare services. Even connecting doctors to patients can be facilitated by AI predictive systems. But I would say that the progress rate is much higher in healthcare related stuff rather than in the basic biology research. This is of course logical because the real-time data it's a lot of that data, whereas the biological data is kind of hard to procure and train models. Another takeaway that a lot of AI-based projects were emerged and were advertised at the beginning of the last year. It's not actually, some projects are not mature enough right now to kind of affect the pandemic's outlook. But we believe that those projects will mature and become more widespread and more adopted within a couple of years from now, and then the next pandemics might be much more efficiently addressed. And so, yeah, so a lot of results are yet to be seen in the AI application, but the conclusions here are that there's basically the time to invest in this area, and the investment is going on right now really rapidly. A lot of new projects emerge, and most importantly, the area is becoming crowded with non-specific investors, not necessarily investors that used to be in biotech, but now they're coming to this area. And then a lot of MVP level projects will be maturing this year to become businesses or spin out startups from research labs. So the area is really going to shine, to boom this year and the year ahead. And yeah, so with that, I'd like to say that we are open to strategic collaboration on joint analytics, and not only in the coronavirus, but in other areas like stem cells and any other emerging topics in the pharmaceutical research. And with that, I'd like to conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Andrei, thank you very much for this insightful presentation. I find it very helpful on this important subject. And I'm sure there will be questions from the audience and when you join us for the Q&A session. So if I may ask you to stop the screen sharing, and I would like to welcome Igor Kindyukov. Igor, welcome. So Igor is the head of algorithmic analytics at Deep Knowledge Analytics, and he will speak about algorithms and big data used in biotech investment analytics. Igor, welcome. You have approximately 10 minutes.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Kate, for this introduction. Indeed, I will be talking about algorithms and data for biotech investment analytics from the COVID-19 standpoint. But before diving into the investment analytics itself, let's make a brief recap of the AI applications in pharma and vaccine development in general. Andrea has provided us already with various examples of these applications and tools that are used on all levels of the war against COVID-19. So the first question is, why in general is it useful to apply AI tools in the industry, and what tools are exactly applied? Basically, what the pharma industry faces now and what it faced during the pandemic, it is the lack of advanced technologies that limit the drug development process, which is reflected in decline in efficiency of pharma R&D. And AI algorithms are one of the solutions to circumvent this problem, because basically what AI algorithms in this sense do, they extract complex hidden nonlinear connections from large data sets, and the value and the utility of these algorithms is in the fact that their capabilities are growing with data sets, with the volume of the data sets, and more conventional tools such as regressions or simple machine learning are stopping their development after some dataset volume threshold is reached. In general, through application, we automate the process of knowledge generation, and in many cases in pharma industry and in vaccine development, the proficiency of these algorithms has already been higher than the efficiency of human researchers. Well, what are these methods? Basically, almost every type of neural network, every type of artificial intelligence algorithms, is already applied in the industry, and starting from simple neural networks, which can be used for example, biomarker development or drug repurposing, and finishing with such advanced tools as generative adversarial networks that are applied for novel molecular generation. And indeed, we have many user cases, many cases when this was applied for the fight against coronavirus, and hundreds of startups have already applied AI tools to deal with the pandemic on all levels, as Andrea already has mentioned. But in this presentation, we shall focus on the first level, that is on the molecular level and on the therapeutic level. And because what we are doing in terms of investment analytics, we are analyzing AI startups that are dealing with molecules, drug discovery, drug repurposing, analysis of various molecule types, classification, and so on. And these tools that we have developed for the whole industry can be applied for the analysis of coronavirus startups as well. And generally, it is a process that facilitates itself, because boom of COVID startups has also facilitated and pharma industry growth in general. And basically, it facilitated interest towards pharmaceutical AI technologies and improved investment climate in the industry in general. So on the left graph, you can see private investments volume, which grew in the crisis year in 2020, despite all negative events in other industries. And even more impressive, the graph which demonstrates the growth of market capitalization of the AI pharma sector, which outperforms enormously not only general market indices such as S&P, but also specific thematic biotech and pharma indices such as IBB and NBI indices. And more about this you can see in our investment digest. The links are provided below, where we reflect and analyze the impact of the COVID pandemic on the whole industry in the previous year and in 2021 as well. In order to deal with this boom, which was facilitated by the pandemic, we have developed big data analytics dashboards. In this particular case, it is Deep Pharma Intelligence Big Data Analytics dashboard, which covers almost all entities present in the industry, almost 300 companies, and many of them have also participated in the fight against COVID-19. We have here more than 700 investors, and altogether we have collected in the industry more than 200,000 data points. And this dashboard covers and includes industry database, industry growth dynamics charts, our analytics both in the form of open access and proprietary reports, as well as interactive mind maps reflecting the connections in the industry. This is a beta version available online, and very soon we'll launch it's as a commercial product available by subscription. And our recent prototype is a dashboard dedicated specifically to the publicly traded pharma companies, which, as I have already mentioned, demonstrates very enormous growth. And this list includes by now 14 companies, and we have constructed several options of portfolios tracking financials and market capitalization of these companies, which is also available online. And further, we have applied this approach for the analysis of longevity industry as well, which includes much more entities, namely 20,000 startups. And the good news are here that we can apply artificial intelligence not only to advance AI in pharma R&D or longevity R&D, but also to advance the investment analytics of the industries itself. Because when we have such large amounts of data points, literally millions of data points, we can apply them. We can apply various AI tools to extract value from them. And that's basically what we are going to do and what we are doing in terms of the analysis of COVID-19 startups and in terms of analysis of biotech startups in general. This is the most common and the most developed tool in this sense is our multiparametric SWOT analysis system, which allows us to analyze 12 vectors or 12 aspects of business development of each AI and pharma company. And basically every vector is a mathematical equation which combines several dozens of data points into single value, single scalar, which reflects some aspect of business development. And and then we get algorithm, we get visualization which demonstrates the strengths and the weaknesses of each company. And these prototypes are also available online. They're not black box systems, and you can review them on our dashboard as well. Another tool we have developed is competitor matching, which is basically a tool that allows us to calculate the distance between companies. Sorry. The distance between companies in terms of their business development. And it allows us to see the closest competitors and to see the companies that are similar in terms of their R&D, in terms of their team structure, in terms of their finance, and so on. And another tool is interactive network diagrams, which also Andrew has already presented. It allows us to see a company or investor in the context of the existing industry infrastructure. This was done initially for the pharma startups, but currently it can be applied for the analysis of the COVID-19 industry and ecosystem. And it can be applied to track collaborations, partnerships, funding rounds, and scientific operations in the industry, and see what is the place of each company in the ecosystem. Almost all technologies we apply for this in general are listed here. We can divide them by application in 4 categories. They include SWOT analysis, data aggregation, forecasting, and clusterization, and competitor analysis. Basically, and AI or advanced machine learning tools are applied mostly for forecasting and clusterization competitor analysis, whereas for SWOT analysis, we apply just more or less simple math. I mean, deterministic formulas with some elementary mathematical transformations. But already for data aggregation, for data extrapolation, we apply deep neural networks, and for forecasting, already recurrent neural networks or neural networks with LSTM layers are applied. Also, a huge area of application is unsupervised machine learning, which can be used for the clusterization. And the point here is to train these algorithms on large data sets, for example, data sets of the whole pharma industry, and then apply them for the analysis of specific COVID startups. And last but not least is stock market analytics. I have already mentioned that the growth of public sector and pharma in the previous year was enormous, and it was measured by hundreds of %. And in this sense, it is crucial to focus on the financials of publicly traded corporations and to track the impact of the COVID pandemic on them. And in terms of this impact, we apply stock market simulations, which enable us to test various scenarios of the development of the pandemics, and to track not only direct effects such as market crashes, but also second order effects such as indirect impact of the COVID startup boom on the development of the whole AI pharma industry. And it turns out that this impact exists indeed. And also what is crucial here to do is to combine financial analytics with technological evaluation. I mean, what we have done in automated SWOT analysis system, and the results and stock market portfolios are also available online by the link below. With that, I would like to finish my presentation. Thank you for attention, and see you in the discussion section.
Yes, well, thank you, Igor, very much for this helpful information, and we look forward to having you at Q&A session. I will ask you to stop sharing your screen, please. And I would like to welcome Macy Smith, who is the Vice President of United Solutions, and she will speak about connecting healthcare ecosystem through consumer AI predictive assessment. Macy, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. As you mentioned, my name is Macy Smith. I'm a Vice President at United Solutions. Thrilled to be here today. Andre alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I want to walk you through an incredible infrastructure that we have built that will enable us to better respond to the global pandemic. Just briefly, for those of you who are unfamiliar with United Solutions, we're based in the United States. We're an emerging technology company that is deeply committed to the pursuit of continuous innovation to help improve the health, the global health. And just notably, we have a lot of experience in healthcare. We have
Macy, we do not hear you for some reason.
$30 to return to mission. What I want to talk to you today is about 𝐀𝐈-𝐝𝐲. And 𝐀𝐈-𝐝𝐲 is actually the first federally authorized AI infrastructure. We've received the FedRAMP High infrastructure recently from the federal government, which is the highest accreditation in the federal government, meaning that we can securely share. Oh, can you guys see my screen?
No longer.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So 𝐀𝐈-𝐝𝐲 enables the secure sharing of healthcare data throughout a global ecosystem. And, you know, we've heard a lot of really intelligent people talk so far, and I know we will later on in the presentation about the power of AI, but really, unless we are able to have data, AI is somewhat useless. So we built 𝐀𝐈-𝐝𝐲, an infrastructure and mobile application to really decentralize the global collection of data, which I also saw someone in the chat ask about. So we'll show you today how we're going to do that. So what I want to walk you through is a consumer mobile application, which is actually available now on the Google Play Store, available for anyone to download in the United States, and we're expanding into other countries as well. We want to show you how we're leveraging blockchain and AI to collect this data and provide it to organizations such as pharmaceutical companies and pharmacies and business so that they can leverage AI to help the response to the pandemic and also prepare for potential future outbreaks as well. So one of the key characteristics of 𝐀𝐈-𝐝𝐲 and the abilities in our mobile app is self-sovereign identity. And many of you may be familiar with self-sovereign identity, but this allows users to own, protect, and securely share this data. The reason why that's important is because now more than ever, cybersecurity is a big issue and critically important. And people are very sensitive about their health data. You walk into a doctor's office, you fill out, a piece of paper which can be floating around, and your information is input into numerous databases, and we don't really know how secure it is. And we know from the dark web it's really not that secure. But allowing people to own their identity on their phone and only share with others what they want to share will make them more comfortable in entering into this ecosystem, so we can begin to collect information about their health, which will only further our ability to leverage AI to improve health outcomes in the future. So people can leverage self-sovereign identity to save certain information, medical information, to their profile, and then share that securely with physicians, pharmaceutical companies, as well as businesses to enter in the future. We also leverage AI to provide an intelligent risk prediction. This is important because a lot of times we don't have data on who has received a test, whether it's positive or negative, who has received a vaccine, or even if they're interested in receiving a vaccine. So we have an artificial intelligence capability that allows users to input symptoms that they're having, where they've traveled recently, what their temperature is, if they're experiencing, anything in particular that may be unusual, as well as a photo of either their face or a certain condition on their skin to allow us to help predict if they may be at risk for COVID. And we have deployed this for other conditions as well. We're able to look at images to determine whether someone has skin cancer or a particular skin condition. So while we're focusing on COVID now, this capability is applicable to other conditions in the future. The prediction accuracy obviously increases as the amount of data that we have increases. So as we build out this ecosystem, which we need everyone here to help us do, we can further improve the predictions and also the value of artificial intelligence moving forward. For individuals as well as businesses, this can help with intelligent risk monitoring. So we have And whenever anyone takes an assessment, they're provided with a score, a percentage of what are the chances they may have COVID or any condition in the future. Then you have access to view where there may be areas of high risk around you. So you know whether you may or may not want to enter a particular building or visit a particular city if people in that area have taken the assessment and have received high risk prediction that they may in fact have COVID. This map also integrates with test centers and vaccination centers. So those who are interested in receiving a test or a vaccination, if they're unsure of their condition, can easily locate where they can do so. This also helps with those businesses, those pharmacies and those doctors' offices and those providing vaccinations know what the demand for vaccines and tests is around them. So they can leverage that intelligence to prepare for the influx of people who are wanting a vaccination. Now, in order to create this profile and attest to your health condition, we need to be able to allow users to attest to that in various ways. One is the attestation of an assessment, whether we predicted that you may be at risk of COVID or not. The second is the attestation to test results or vaccinations you've received. So you can add a vaccination if you've received one in the past, or your doctor or that person administering a vaccine can, through the application, attest to the fact that you've received a test or vaccination. That is added to your profile, and that allows you to share that information and only that information in the future if you need it to enter a particular facility or travel. It's that health passport that I'm sure you've been hearing about. Finally, and to go to the question that someone asked in the Q&A, can we crowdsource this data in some way? Well, absolutely. By decentralizing the collection of data and allowing individuals to attest to their health on their own and save that information and share it securely via a blockchain, we are doing that with 𝐶𝐠G. So imagine someone gets a vaccination. One of the important things that we want to know now are how are people responding? What is the efficacy? By entering every day how you're feeling, if you're having any particular symptoms like you see here, potentially a rash, or maybe you're very tired or you're feeling nauseous. Within 𝐶𝐠G, you can write in your health journal every day how it is that you're feeling, and that information can be shared with the pharmaceutical companies who are making the drugs, with the doctors who administered the vaccine, so that they can monitor the health of their patients and of those who are receiving drugs. This will allow us to drastically improve not only the vaccinations that are created now, but also the vaccination and drugs that we want to create in the future. Finally, there is a web app component that allows you to visualize the vaccine intelligence and leverage the AI for your organization. Whether you're a business looking to monitor the health of your employees or those coming in and out of your store, whether you are a pharmaceutical company or a hospital looking to track demand and visualize the number of people who have received a vaccination or a test. You can leverage the AI to do that. One of the things that United Solutions is most passionate about is building what we call human AI or humanizing AI. This infrastructure allows people and users, as opposed to a bunch of data scientists coming in and building unique models, we have created the ability for you to build a model on your own to derive intelligence that you're interested in from the AI. So I just want to end by saying an ecosystem takes a bunch of parts. I know there are a lot of people on the line today who are interested in how can we all work together to get over this pandemic and prepare for things in the future, such as this, potential outbreaks in the future. And we'd love to collaborate with you within the 𝐶𝐠G ecosystem to help us respond to the pandemic and decentralized data collection.
Well, thanks a lot, Macy, for this helpful presentation. And with this, I would like to invite our next speakers, who are Maximilian Winter and Krish Ramadurai of Harmonix Fund. And Maximilian and Krish will speak about convergence of deep technology and life sciences, as well as regarding the importance of computational approach in scientific advancements. Guys, welcome. Together you will have about 15 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Kate. Yeah, oh, we don't have a presentation. We thought this was a Q&A panelist session. Sorry, will a panel go on now, or do we have to present?
Well, actually, the idea is that once every presenter finishes, and there's one presenter after you, we will have a joint Q&A session for all of the panelists.
Okay.
But we would be delighted to hear about the work that Harmonix Fund does.
Great. Thank you for inviting us. Harmonix Fund is an early stage venture capital fund investing at the intersection of healthcare, life sciences, and deep technology. We deploy evidence-based approaches to analyze and accelerate the next generation of scientific breakthroughs. Yep, we invest in Series C or Series B companies, typically that are leveraging a computational approach to accelerate everything from clinical and healthcare workflows to drug discovery and development. Typically, we like to invest right at the cusp of commercialization of technology or product or service that has a unique defensible IP mode, as well as strong structured growth potential and scaling in a market. We typically source our companies from the top accelerators, incubators, academic research institutes. Our team is composed of scientists, engineers, researchers that have a passion for not only pushing the outward boundaries of science, but also moving forward with clinically relevant and validated science to help ultimately improve patient quality of life. As you know, the space in the computation and what we call tech bio as opposed to biotech has been exploding recently, and we've been able to leverage our portfolio on that same growth acceleration curve. Typically, we really look for validated mechanics, whether it comes to the data entry and the actual library construction of these companies, because as you know, the computational approach is only as good as the data that it's trained on. And for us, we're always keen on looking at companies that have that strong structured data growth, both from a public aggregation standpoint, but also from a internal development standpoint, and leveraging unique data sets from private institutions and major academic institutions. And what we see for the future is that these large computationally driven companies, whether it be in drug development, discovery, or clinical pipeline development, are really leveraging heterogeneous data to create non-biased outcomes and ultimately improve what we can do on drug development and discovery. Because as everyone knows, the typical time frame is 10 to 15 years and $2 billion for a drug to hit market, and we're very keen on collapsing that time frame into an accelerated framework, particularly on the front end of the discovery value chain, where it typically takes 3 years and up to $20 million to get a lead candidate selected, as we've seen with companies like in silico medicine and other computationally driven companies. The ability to compress that timeline into less than 12 months for less than a few $1 million represents a novel paradigm shift in how we bring biological assets to clinic. And at the end of the day, what that translates into is a reduced price point for customers receiving these therapeutics on the other end of the spectrum. And that's something that I think in the whole grand scheme of everything that we've been excited to see in particular.
And maybe we'll do our own little panel quickly to inform everybody of some trends and some of the things that we've seen, as well as some of the trends that we have decided to invest in, and which have also been very helpful with Deep Pharma, and DKV has also been very helpful in helping us to sort of separate the signal from the noise and find some of these opportunities. So Krish, what I'm thinking of one investment in particular. It's a robotic cloud lab called Stratios, and maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about what Stratios is doing, why does it make a difference, and why we decided to join the team there.
Yeah, so we've noticed a large amount of interest on high throughput automated laboratory companies and having the ability to automate workflow processes, because the typical paradigm in life science research is a sequence of operating protocols that are kind of old school. And now that we've been able to integrate high throughput technology with computation, we're able to create these automated laboratories. And Stratios is a great example of that, where it's a robotic lab platform company that works in synthetic biology and drug discovery, and is able to allow scientists to conduct research remotely from their cell phone and anywhere in the world, as opposed to being physically in the laboratory. And during COVID, it's been a monumental shift in R&D workflows to be able to conduct scientific research in a remote fashion. And that's then something that's been exciting, because we see this now being a paradigm shift in the future.
And then maybe jumping to a different area of pharmaceutical drug development and drug discovery, if you want to say a few sentences about that, or mention any of the interesting companies that we've seen in the space.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Big Pharma has been particularly interested in space. Major companies, pharmaceutical entities like Merck, AstraZeneca, and Eli Lilly have been really keen on automating redundant processes in their workflows. So it's been great to see the major input from the corporate side to understand the disruption and the ability of these technologies to scale their own internal research and development pipelines.
Yeah, and maybe you could mention a little bit about some of the work that Aranza is doing, or Sana Health, some of these other companies that are sort of in these trends or adjacent trends.
So the biggest thing for any of these computational companies going forward is the ability to identify your respondent patient population, and how they'll actually, in designing drugs, ultimately you need to make sure that they work in humans, and the ability to make sure that you're using the patient populace data that the drug will be trained on and clinically deployed on is super important. Otherwise, it's great to automate the discovery process, but if the assets are failing in the clinical development pipeline, that's another thing. So all of our companies within our portfolio have this unique ability to be able to be trained on heterogeneous patient data and have those better accelerated clinical outcomes while simultaneously mitigating the failure rate of the clinical development pipeline.
Yeah, and lastly, maybe some of the automation plays that you've seen, maybe not in robotic cloud labs, but something like what Rad AI is working on, and some of these other companies, that is another mega trend.
One of the biggest elements that, AI has been rather a relatively ambiguous term. So at Harmonix, we've been keen on figuring out companies that have functionally scalable technologies that are user-friendly and compliant. So when it comes to healthcare system workflows, the biggest thing for technology is to have the provider or the healthcare institution actually utilize the technology and integrate it seamlessly into our workflows. So everything from dictation and automation and radiological imaging analysis for a company of ours called Rad AI, to complex medical data tagging is something that can increase clinical, accelerate clinical workflows, reduce costs, and scale effectively in institutions. So,
thank you.
Great. Well, thanks guys for sharing, and we're looking forward to having you at the Q&A session. Thanks.
Great, thanks.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce our last but not least speaker, Dasha Redko. Dasha is an applied scientist at Cyclica, and she will speak about drug repurposing, specifically PolyPharmDB. Dasha, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Can you see my deck?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So yeah, my name is Dasha. I'm an applied scientist at Cyclica. We are an AI-based drug discovery company based in Toronto, Canada. And today I want to tell you about our drug repurposing tool called PolyPharmDB, and specifically about how we applied it for COVID-19. You have seen this slide in Andre's presentation, and probably you look at this every day. While the vaccination against SARS-CoV-2 is underway, our cases are still very high. And there is still a need for a broad spectrum therapeutical intervention in order to mediate this current and possible future pandemics of coronaviruses. Just to give you a little bit of a preview of the punchline of this talk so that you know where I'm headed, I will be telling you about the process we went through to uncover an antiviral activity of an approved oral drug. The entire story with the drug identity and more specifics on the technology will be published tomorrow. But today, I want to tell you about this amazing multi-party Canadian private and public partnership between Ryerson University, University of Toronto, Vector Institute, and Cyclica being at the epicenter, both mediating this collaboration and contributing its technology and funding to the project. Before I go on, I also want to give a big thanks to the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research and National Research Council for supporting this project as well. The viral cycle is quite a complex process, which gives scientists a lot of opportunities to interfere with this process and come up with antiviral medications. There are antivirals on the market that are targeting the viral proteins involved in this cycle, but there are also some that are targeting the host proteins as well. When faced with a new virus like SARS-CoV-2, the challenge is to identify that essential protein or part of this process to interfere with in order to fight that infection. But let's say that we have found that target, that protein that is essential for the virus to stop replicating. Even further, let's imagine that we used whatever tool that we have in our disposal to quickly find the ligand, a novel activator or inhibitor for that protein or target that we've identified. And in a couple of slides, I'll tell you what we are proposing as one of our tools for doing that. But what is next once we've done that? Today, in this pandemic, when the world is in lockdown, will finding that novel molecule help us? Because it takes about 10 years, as I was discussed here today, to get a drug approved for being used on the market. And there is also a high failure rate associated with that process. So what can we do to speed this up? Are all efforts for drug discovery pointless at this point? What can AI specifically do in this process? And what can Cyclica as an AI drug discovery company do in this case? These are some of the questions that we have been struggling with on our team ever since we initiated our COVID-19 work a year ago. And so one thing we thought we could utilize in this case is this concept of polypharmacology, which is actually the fundamental principle on which Cyclica was built. And that is that a given molecule is estimated to interact with something on the order of dozens of proteins in our bodies. But typically, we do not know about all of these off-target interactions, some of which are beneficial, and some of these could be actually detrimental or toxic. So what we thought we could do, if we took all the drugs out there for which there is clinical data, of which there is about 10,000, where at least we know something about the toxicity and bioavailability of those molecules, and find out about every protein that those molecules bind to. Can we, in doing so, exploit every possible therapeutic potential of these drugs that have clinical data? And now then the question would be, how would we exploit or explore that therapeutic potential of those molecules? Well, to do that, we can use one of our two main machine learning engines that we have built at Cyclica. And we call this engine matchmaker. This engine predicts whether a given molecule would interact with a given protein. It is a deep learning model built on millions of drug target interactions, as well as thousands of 3D structures. It is very runtime efficient, and that's what allows us to have a high throughput screening. And that's why we can exhaustively screen millions of molecules against thousands of human proteins in a reasonable amount of time. So using Matchmaker, we took these 10,000 drugs, of which about 2,000 are approved. We featurized them using Matchmaker, and we evaluated their binding to each of the proteins that we have in our Matchmaker model, of which there's about 8,500 human proteins. In the end, what we end up with are 10,000 by about 8,000 predictions for the likelihood of binding of each drug to each protein in our model, and we call this resource PolyPharmDB. And now that we have that, all we need is are some relevant targets for our problem. And then we can pull out molecules previously not reported to interact with those targets we would identify in the first step out of the PolyPharmDB. And in doing so, therefore, we would be recycling drugs. This is what the sign is supposed to represent. Of course, we need some experimental validation because these are merely computational predictions. So when we started our COVID-19 work a year ago, we published this preprint in Chem Archives where we used PolyPharmDB to propose repurposing opportunities. But of course, the big problem there was that we did not have the cycle fully closed. We were missing two major links here. One was that the targets that we have identified were taken from a literature review based on previous coronaviruses, experimental projects. And two, we did not have a chance to test these predictions experimentally. So now, almost exactly a year from the time that we published that preprint, another preprint is going to be published tomorrow, where we set up this fruitful collaboration where we used targets predicted by an AI algorithm from the Vector Institute to mine our Cyclica PolyPharmDB tool. And then in a collaboration with Ryerson Institute, we had those predictions tested experimentally in a cell-based assay and biochemical assays. And it turns out that it is good to collaborate. It's really good to close the cycle. As I mentioned, we will be sharing this work tomorrow. And although we are excited to share these results, it is also quite exciting to find this application of previously approved drugs in using this research PolyPharmDB, and we are even more excited about what are the implications of this platform for drug repurposing. So if you're interested in learning more about PolyPharmDB and some of the other collaborations we have in that respect, please reach out to us and we can have a conversation. Thank you very much.
Dasha, thank you very much for this very interesting, excellent presentation. It was a pleasure to have you. And we will now proceed with our Q&A session. And I will be joined by Dr. Andrei Buvайло, who will, as a subject matter expert, moderate this Q&A session. And I will be grateful if all of our speakers will turn their video mode on. Thank you. Andrei, I'll let you take over here.
First of all, thank you everyone for great presentations. It was for me, it was pleasure listening to a lot of insights myself, and I hope our readers also found out a lot of useful information. And I think I'd start with reading some questions that came from the audience, and then later I would ask several questions myself to our guests, because a lot of things that are so interesting. So the first question came about how AI and crowdsourcing of knowledge can be combined to streamline drug discovery. I would before allowing anyone to take this question, I would provide my answer as well, because I happen to know a project which was doing just that, combining crowdsourcing knowledge and AI. That's the COVID moonshot initiatives. I happen to be aware of this initiative when I was doing my research for biopharma trend. And the idea here is that the guys, the startup, the New York-based startup, they created the AI system for the synthesis prediction and for identifying like rating molecules based on their drug likeness on the one hand, and on the other hand, they are synthetic accessibility, basically. And so what they did, they launched crowdsourced campaign to submit drug designs. Like everybody could contribute some unique drug design, and so they got so many of them that they employed their AI system to essentially predict the best suggestions, crowdsourced suggestions. So that was the project. Yeah, so anyone else maybe can comment as well.
Yeah, I was also.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, you may proceed.
I just wanted to add that we actually participated in that challenge. It contributed some molecules, and we're ongoing. We're buying more molecules, having more of them tested through Animine and Postera. So I'm glad Andre brought it up. Thank you.
By the way, what's the name of that startup? I forgot the name.
Postera?
Yeah, Postera. Yeah.
Postera, the Moonshot Project. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, right. Ihor, you?
Yeah, I would also like to add here from the investment analytics standpoint. I mean, I think a great way to apply AI, to combine AI and crowdsourcing, is to apply AI as a validation method for crowdsourcing. I mean, if in terms of data aggregation, even in our big data analytics dashboard, people are adding some info on the startups, on technologies, on R&D processes, and so on. And on the other hand, we apply AI for the extrapolation of data points. I mean, we use kind of missing data points as variables that we are trying to predict, and we get some results. And if these results are comparable with what crowdsourcing solutions are producing, it looks like a relevant and validated result. So I guess there is a pretty large opportunity in the validation of crowdsourced information, of crowdsourced data aggregation by AI methods.
Thank you, Igor. Anyone else? And I'm ready to go to the next question. Yes, so there's, I don't know, the interesting question about the blockchain. I'm not exactly the expert on blockchain, but I guess this is for Messi specifically. Did you consider using the alternative to blockchain, which is Hedera? I think it's hash graphs or something like that. The guy is curious, I guess.
Yeah. So thanks. That's a great question. So one way we're dealing with the blockchain speed, or the worry that there are limitations to speed, is by pursuing a layer 2 sidechain strategy, utilizing plasma sidechain. So the sidechains add value by acting as a lower cost but a higher throughput augmentation to the slower and more expensive but generally more secure layer 1 chains. And I am not a blockchain expert by any means. That is the extent to which I can talk about our strategy, but would love to provide more information if you have it.
Okay, great to know. Thank you. Next, there was again the question specifically addressed to Maximilian and Krish, I guess, and that is, do you only invest in like Series B companies, or you accept seed investment? I mean, proposals, like, by the way, I have no idea.
We meant to say Series Seed to Series B initially for initial investments before the follow-ons. Was there any other part to the question?
I guess that's it. And I would love to ask the question myself here. The follow-on question: do you guys, what do you guys think about the year 2021 in terms of this whole investment trajectory? Like 2020 was the absolutely record-breaking year in terms of everything in biotech. Investment was booming, M&A was booming, like stock indices were all times high. What do you think? Will we see some kind of correction in this landscape, or the things will keep growing? What do you think?
Yeah, I'll give a quick answer, and then Chris can give another answer. But I think the market has definitely been red hot. It could cool down, but I think it's more likely that certain parts of the market will cool down, like the SPAC phenomenon. There's about 500 SPACs out there that are companies that are formed that are looking for companies to acquire. And either that is going to fizzle out after they acquire those 500 companies, or even before, if investors get skittish. I think there has been some concern that some of the companies don't have any revenue, or that they have scientific or engineering risk remaining, and they're going public too early. So I think any SPAC should have significant validations on scientific, engineering, and revenue milestones. Sometimes the revenue is not possible, like in pharma drug discovery, but yeah. And then Chris?
Yep, I think at the end of the day, regardless of the market, these companies need to achieve their scientific milestones. Especially anything that's in drug development or discovery, you still have the classic biotech validation milestones of IND enabling studies, GLP tox studies, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, etc. And so while indeed it takes time to build the infrastructure of the artificial intelligence or the computational approach, at the end of the day, these companies still kind of abide by the classic biotechnology value inflection points, and being able to put those biological assets in the clinic and making sure that the valuation of the company is in line with the clinical development stage. And right now, mRNA has been very hot, and you see a lot of preclinical companies going IPO. For us, we always want to make sure that the benchmark standards of the science is there, so that when the company does go public, that it can be a company that can grow in the future and not collapse after having failed lead asset program, or not have multiple shots on goal.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of the traditional biotech and big pharma companies dabbled in AI and computational approaches in 2019 and 20, and that now it's almost a consensus. So it's like, if you don't do it, then you're missing out, and your competition is just like in automotive, where VW and all these players are rushing towards electric vehicles to catch up with Tesla. So I think now every major pharma is and even other companies are adapting computational approaches.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you very much, Maximilian and Krish. So from my side, I will add that Deep Pharma Intelligence, we are kind of working very hard to differentiate the signal from noise, in terms of, like Maximilian mentioned, everybody rushed into the area, and not necessarily everybody has the greatest offering in terms of technology. And this is where we are analyzing the companies and making the due diligence to basically sort out who is going to be the leader and who is not. And so, yeah, but following up with the next question, there is a question like, how many, from the audience, how many times the deep learning kind of stuff is better than good old machine learning, I assume, for drug discovery or healthcare? I guess Igor maybe can comment. Or
yeah, so I can only enhance my what I already said in the presentation. So basically it depends on the volume of the data sets and the abundance of the data. As long as we have increasing data sets, millions of data points and so on, the results will definitely be different, both in terms of AI applications for drug development, drug repurposing and so on, and for the applications of AI for analytics of R&D processes as well. And another question is just we cannot apply what's called traditional machine learning tools for many problems, because many problems are just not non-linear. Yeah, in drug discovery, in drug development, they're highly non-linear, so to speak. And the difference between the methods is it's not just quantitative, it's qualitative. And on the other hand, for example, in biomarker development, if just very, very kind of short biomarker panel, maybe there are 10 biomarkers, the difference between simple regressions and deep neural networks will not be as large. So it is a highly kind of domain-specific issue. But if the problem is complex, such as protein folding, you will not do anything by simple machine learning at all. And also I would like to add to the previous question. I mean, from the purely financial and monetary standpoint, that whether there will be correction or the market is overheated. I mean, even not considering all technological trends and so on, what already Maximilian and Chris have pointed out, even without that, I mean, as long as we have monetary emissions by Fed and by European Central Bank in the amounts that we have today, like correction is almost impossible, and they're going to continue it. And on the other hand, just statistics, for these 3 months that we have in 2021, the market growth, AI and pharma market growth, is already higher than in the first 3 months of the previous year. So the statistics is also kind of positive. But if you ask me more strategically, I guess there will be definitely correction, not in this year, but it should be, because there are very advanced startups and companies, and there are overhyped startups, and everyone is rushing into industry, and there is this discrepancy, at least not correction, but the money should flow to more advanced companies from overhyped. This definitely should happen, but it will not happen kind of in several months, I guess.
Thank you. The next question, I think we are already, Kate, how much time do we have?
I think we have 3 minutes, and then I'll just...
Okay. I will be wrapping up. So we have another question specifically for 𝐶IGLETs. The question came from the audience, and it is, do you apply AI to unstructured protein data? And if not, would you apply it?
At the moment, at the moment, we do not apply AI to unstructured protein data, but we can incorporate new structural data into our model. So we do have a certain set of proteins that I mentioned, the 8,500 proteins that we have trained our model on. But we do have the capability, if you have a structure or you have a reliable homology model, to evaluate that as well. So we would featureize it in exactly the same way as we would do it for the training set and evaluate it. As far as disordered proteins go, because we do incorporate the structural information in, at this time, we do not have the capability to look at the disordered proteins. Yeah, I just wanted to add to the previous question about the traditional machine learning versus deep learning. I agree with Igor, and that is something there's very feature dependent. So whenever we are looking into a problem at Cyclica, we are actually evaluating both kinds of models. And for if the data is something structured like an image or something like that, or a structure, as Igor pointed out, we do find that the deep learning is required. But when it's sometimes a combination of features that are linear, not necessarily related, then sometimes the traditional machine learning works, something like a random forest works out for us better.
Makes sense. Thank you very much. Yes, so I guess we addressed all the questions. Like, it's a lot of thank you for the presentation, by the way. So I guess the audience is enjoying. But anyway, I'm passing the floor to Kate. I think we're okay. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Andrei, for moderating this Q&A. And I shall proceed with some closing remarks. So let me share my screen. Okay, well, first of all, big thanks to our wonderful speakers today. And we also thank the audience who virtually joined. As I mentioned earlier, we are hosting a series of webinars, and this is the second set. So there will be future events, and we hope that we will see our speakers and the audience thereafter as well. Given the interest of people who joined in AI and pharma, I wanted to give a brief preview of some of our recent projects that could be of interest. Igor actually already mentioned our big data analytics dashboard, which is open access, and it's very helpful for anyone who wants to navigate companies, investors, R&D deals in the AI and pharma space. Further, of special interest to anyone who wishes to invest, our team recently released an investment digest with respect to AI in drug development and biomarker development investment digest. So here you can see it's an interactive tool, again, open access, and you can see who's who in terms of promising startups, investors, largest investment rounds, R&D trends, and the related issues. Again, we hope we stay in touch. Our group is very active in the space, and we have a newsletter as well as a number of analytical reports. So please visit our website, www.deep-pharma.tech. We hope to see you again, and we thank everyone for attending.